Welcome to Switch Your Sitch with your host, Katie Turner. Super excited today because it's something that I've kind of dabbled in the property market. It's something that as a business owner, I've had to look to for superannuation more than anything, because when I was 20 and I kicked off my first business, super was very long away, and I thought I might probably be dead before I needed to draw a super. But as I've gotten older, I've had to look at it. So I have Ari Akbaraian. I'm trying not to bastardize that last name, being a full-blood Aussie, who owns Asset Realty. I always go reality, but it's not. It's realty. Here on not only on the North Shore, but also in the eastern suburbs. So Ari's going to talk to us about not only his background and how Asset Realty became a franchise brand that was customer centric more so than just sales, but also what's happened in the housing market, interest rates. We talked about housing growth rates as well, and in certain areas of Sydney. So I'm going to hand it over to Ari and give us a little bit about your background, how come you switched your sitch into property and owning your own real estate agents?
Okay, so a while ago, obviously, when I was about 17, 18, my parents or my mother owned a real estate company. She asked me to work for her, which I did while I was going through uni. I was studying business at Macquarie at the time, and decided to continue doing work with her, leasing properties and managing properties. And then over time, I went to uni and combined my degree with business and property, going into property economics. And I did that at University of Western Sydney. And from there, I got a secondment, or kind of a graduate swap program with University of Western Sydney and University of Reading, and went to England, finished off my degree there with honours in investment and finance and property.
Wow.
I got a graduate job in London with Savills PLC. That job took me to Ireland as well, in Dublin, which is exciting. I did rotation work, rotation being that I worked in different sectors of the property industry within their organisation.
Right, wow.
One of which was retail, the other was valuation, urban property management, portfolio management, and then I came offices, and then eventually new homes, which is like selling houses off the plan or units off the plan, but working with developers to source their sites and then source their buyers to buy a concept design from them. And I'll give you one example, which everyone should know. Arsenal Stadium, Highbury. Arsenal's a big football club.
Yes.
What they decided to do was they used our services to buy a old waste site to build a new stadium.
Right.
But as part of that, they wanted to sell, they wanted to redevelop their old stadium, which is Highbury. And they did so. They drafted up architectural plans. And then what we did was that concept was taken with approval with the, councillors in London. But what happened was that once it got approved, we sold them off the plan. And we had this big launch event with all the Arsenal players and so on and so forth. And it was like selling like fashion and or movie tickets. It was fantastic. And we make a great event for it, which gave me a lot of experience because, we did it in a way that we had, let's say, 4,000 or 5,000 people lining up overnight to buy one of these units at Highbury. So we were selling a piece of history at the time. And that's how we marketed that scheme. But that scheme had to have a concept. It had to have an idea. It had to have some kind of branding, or people wouldn't come. And that for me was one of the highlights of my graduate program in Savills there. And then it got to a situation in 2009, 2010, where I got a bit homesick. I was approaching 30 and I decided to move home. When I moved home, I decided to look for jobs in the city with larger companies. And as I was doing that, I was doing a bit of weekend work for my mother in family business.
Yeah. You got a family business?
Yes, we have a family business. So I did that. We had a small office here in Gordon. And what happened was that over time, as I was looking for the job and doing interviews, it was a situation where I was actually getting sales because I had a license.
Right.
So I was getting sales, and there was, Sydney property market was not as buoyant, but it wasn't as bad either. It was growing. And I sold a lot of properties, and I made a decent amount of money. And then my mother had a frank chat with me. She said, "Look, do you want to go for a job in the city after 5 months, or do you want to stay in the family business?" And it was an easy decision because the money was far better than what they were offering me in the city. So I decided to stay in real estate, and I loved it. I love chatting to people. I like socializing, as you probably know. And the reality is that with my selling background, my property education, and my experience, it kind of morphed into this real estate agent, this hybrid real estate agent that I have become today.
I love that, because not only are you providing, customer experience, like you said, that with that Arsenal example, that is really about how you should feel when you're buying your first house or a piece of property. It should be exciting. It should, have some historical, especially the one that you're going to live in. It should, I suppose it's a huge emotional purchase, right?
That's right. For a lot of people. Purchase. That's right.
For a lot of people. And I have a background, I have a degree in economics as well. How fundamental, like people say to me, "Oh, you don't need a degree to be good at business." And I do believe that there are entrepreneurs out there who have built a business without any formal education. But for me, economics is fundamental to any business, understanding demand and supply, shifts in the economy, how it affects your business.
That's right.
Like all these bullshit business coaches out there at the moment that I'm saying, COVID doesn't affect your business. If you have a good product or service, it doesn't matter what happens. To me, that's crap, because we know from an economic standpoint of view that, the businesses, people spend based on expectations. And if they think they're going to lose their job, or if they think, they're going to retract their spending, and that has a huge play on economic forces. So
that's right. That's right.
Economics is one of the best degrees that you can have, understanding markets, understanding price structures, all of the economy, basically.
Yeah. It's funny, when I macroeconomics, when I first did like one of my, subjects, I remember was macroeconomics. And I'll be honest, when I was at Macquarie, I actually failed that subject.
Macro 110, I did my economics degree at Macquarie as well.
Yeah. And I just, because I had the most, and I'll be honest, I had a very, placid, I would say, teacher, lecturer. He was very cold, just textbook, blah, blah. And I didn't really enjoy the subject. But then when I went to University of Western Sydney, I'll never forget this. I did this subject again, obviously, as I failed that one subject. So I did that subject again. And I got an award, actually. I remember going to the city to receive an award for getting a high distinction. I was in the top percentile. They had some kind of some kind of award, and I still got it at home. And I got the top award for it, not because I did it again and I relearned, because I didn't even take any interest in it the first time I did it. But the second time I did it, what this Harbhajan Singh, I still don't forget, Dr. Harbhajan Singh, he entered the lecture hall and he said, and I was about to fall asleep at this stage, it was winter, and he said to me, and he said, "Today, ladies and gentlemen, I am going to teach you about the world. I'm going to take you so far around the world and back again that you are going to understand how the entire world works." As soon as he said that, I was switched in. I started loving this subject, and for me, it has helped me a long way going forward. But I agree with you. You don't necessarily have to be educated in order to be successful. You have to work hard. I think that's the fundamental crux of it. You have to work hard in any industry you're in. Yes. But look, an education does, it did help me because I do use my head in a lot of the decisions I make. And it does help me in the business sense. So yeah, look, it was fantastic that I did that. I'm really thankful for that lecturer to kind of open my eyes that way. And I think because of him and that high distinction, those awards I received, I was able to get into that, University of Reading, which is a top property university in the world. So and
a good lecturer or a good teacher can make a huge difference,
Yeah, definitely.
Business doesn't have to be boring. It should be exciting. That's what I say to my clients. That's my jam. I want to bring the excitement to it. I want to bring strategy. It's like, whoa. So you've been in the franchising game for a while, and you've come out of the franchising game to launch your own mini boutique franchise style. Tell us a little bit about that. And why?
Okay, so at the end of the day, what I wanted to do was I was working for that big franchise group. Kind of any good work we did was lost in the fog of the larger network. So what I did was, we wanted to be accountable, I guess, for our own good work. Yeah. And with Asset, this brand that we've not just created, but we've also kind of harnessed in a way. We've tried to create a brand where it's customer focused. Yeah. It's about goodwill. It's about building goodwill. And the only way you can build goodwill is by good deals, by making sure that every type of business you do, you're not just giving it 110%, you're going that even extra mile. And that's just by working hard. It's by working hard, being knowledgeable about what you're doing. So you're being an expert in what you're doing. So you have the skills, and obviously creating deals that they turn around and go, oh, wow, that was value added. Geez, I made a lot of money with that guy, and I didn't think about that angle. And that's the key. Because it's easy to, in a lot of people, and believe me or believe me not, but a lot of people think that this property is an easy gig. It is. It can be. It can be a very easy gig. You can put a signboard in a buoyant market and sell a property. Yeah. It's not very difficult. But what separates us, I guess, to an extent, is in those tough times, in the tougher markets, where you're able to extract the deal out of nowhere, and you're able to convince a buyer of a different angle into buying this certain property, like, for example, a sloping block, or one density. So, for example, if you have a house, it's R2, and you see a future planning proposal saying it's going to be R3 or R4 in the future, you're letting your vendors know, your clients know. So the client, instead of selling his house for, let's say, $2 million, he can actually make an extra $1 million. Because he can actually, the future purchaser can actually build more on that exact same piece of land. Right. So it's about a value-added service, and that's just an example. But look, the marketing side of things is also quite interesting for me. I like to market properties in a way that really captures, as I brought on that Arsenal example. I like to capture that excitement, that buzz. And the only way to create a buzz is really making sure that your brand is consistent when it comes to portraying a property to the target market. That means the photos have to be sharp, the videos have to be, very descriptive about the property itself, and also kind of bringing in the highest and best use of every property, kind of promoting those kind of points of the highest and best use. And highest and best use being Barara Waters, and I'll take your example, is that, you're not far from parks, nature, national park, nature. You've got like water near you. You can have a boat. You're not that far from the Central Coast if you want to escape to the beaches out there. And you're on a train line as well, so you can go to the city as well. So it's got everything going for it, and that's why, for example, some people will decide to go into Barara rather than to, for example, Bellevue Hill, hypothetically.
Yeah. So I love what you've said, because you've said everything that a business owner I have spoken to that makes a successful business true. It's a shitload of hard work. And anybody that tells you that there's anything such as passive income to be made, or, easy income, is lying to you. And I'll put that out for any business coach who thinks that they've got the golden ticket for their clients. Even if you are to buy property, there's no golden rule to say that you're going to make money. It's still a risk, right? Especially if you don't do your research. I'm a big one on that. Is some people just buy because they feel like they have to get in the market, but they're not researching where, and we'll come back to that.
Yeah.
And also providing a customer experience, like, that's amazing, because that, the old real estate agents were like used car salesmen, that's just buy it, we get our money. And whereas you're starting to innovate the market to create an experience that customers get exciting about, because it's their biggest purchase in their life, right?
It is. And you have to also kind of feel for a lot of purchases. And I guess you're going to ask me that question as well about affordability and so on and so forth. Because some people come into a property, they'll have a look at it, they'll fall in love with it, but they'll go to an auction and they'll be outbid by somebody else who's also fallen in love with the same property. But they've just got a bigger, income capacity. And you have to see with that, once you've got that buyer, you have to continue looking for that buyer. And that's where the value-added service comes in. So you don't just leave them behind and say, oh, well, bad luck, you missed out on that one. Thank you, see you later. No, you look at that person and say, okay, they've worked very hard to, let's say, hypothetically have $2 million to spend, because you have to work hard to earn, to have that kind of money. Even for the banks to lend you that kind of money, you still have to work bloody hard. So if they've worked hard, they've probably got a family, they're looking at $2 million and they're thinking, what can I buy in Sydney?
You're exactly right. $2 million. I mean, you're probably going to tell me that's the average price of housing these days in Sydney.
Not really.
No.
No, depends on where you're going. I mean, look, I was looking at data this morning, and look, I'll give you an example. Let's just go with where I am right now, Gordon.
Yeah.
Median house prices here are 3.54 million dollars. That is a 45.7% increase from this time last year.
So we talked a bit about this off air. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah.
And
I'll bring it back to your area.
yeah.
So Barara, it's 1.35 million. Okay. 29.4% increase from this time last year. So imagine if you had money in 2020 and you had, let's say, I don't know, $2 million
yes.
in 2020. And you thought, you know what, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to buy a house. And you kept on missing out on home after home after home after home after home. And now you got to this point in time,
which
you
many
still got that you still got to $2 million.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, damn, I can't afford to buy.
So what do they do? Units, or do they move out of the area? What have you seen the trend be?
The trend is, yes, some of them are going to units, and that's not a bad thing. I mean, look, if you look at some of the other countries across the world, a lot of people in New York, for example, if you're within a certain range of Manhattan, you know, you're living in a unit generally. So yeah, people are sometimes, you know, if they're living in the city, they are buying, let's say, a 2-bedroom or a 3-bedroom a unit here because they have to work in the city and they want to send their kids to good school. So we're seeing a lot of stock around the you know, Wahroonga down to Roseville area sell quite a fair bit. Hornsby as well starting to pick up as well. Yeah. But the thing is that you know, and this will get onto a future question as well. But they're buying the apartment here, and then maybe with the extra income they have, they'll go and buy a rural property to have that land. And what they want to do is obviously have that city life for a while, probably pass that on to their children once they go to university, and then probably maybe semi-retire or just decide to have that lifestyle choice in a rural area. And that could be either Kiama, the Colburn, something to that effect.
So not only are we seeing huge growth, you're talking between 30 and 50% growth here in the North Shore, you're also seeing massive growth in rural areas since COVID as well.
Well, yeah, look, I'll give you one example. So my brother-in-law, he sold his place in Cremorne in 2020. Probably would have got much more money for it this year, but he sold then, and he decided to move to not a rural area, I guess, but a regional town, Kiama. Yeah. We'll call that a regional town outside of Sydney. And he ended up buying there a nice place, beautiful house near the water, so on and so forth. And you know, at the time we were thinking, oh God, you know, like you do work in Sydney. He works for a very, very big tech company in Sydney. Right. Huge, one of the biggest, I think, tech companies in the world. And I won't name them. But he works for them, and what he does is he remotely, like through Zoom, like we are now. Yeah. Through Zoom, he's you know, he does meetings. He comes in Sydney maybe once every week or 2 weeks, something to that effect. But his family, what he said to me is his family's having a great life out there. You know, he goes surfing. He's never done surfing. Now he surfs. He goes surfing every day. He plays golf. He does this. He does that. So he's got a lot more room and a lot more financial freedom by selling here and going out to rural areas. But if I look at, let's say, Kiama, hypothetically, I'll give you an example. Now, we said in Barara it was a 29.4% increase. The median house price in Barara is 1.35. Now, hear this. In Kiama, the median house price is 1.46 million.
Wow.
And the increase, I'm just looking at it here live, is 52.2% increase from this time last year. So he may have lost by selling last year in Cremorne, but he's gained a hell of a lot by buying in Kiama when he did.
Because and is this trend ongoing, do you think? Like,
do I think it will be ongoing? Look, it's a very hard question to answer. The reason why I say this is because it's like that Melbourne theory, and I'll tell you this. In the early 2000s, a lot of my friends said, "Look, you know what? I can't afford Sydney. I'm going to Brisbane or Melbourne." Okay? Yes. And they did. They went over there. So on and so forth. The reality is that Sydney is one of the most desirable cities on earth. People don't know how nice Sydney is until they move away from Sydney.
That's right.
When they move away from Sydney, they realize, okay, so the beach is not as good as our beaches. Okay, that's great. It's a bit too warm here. The climate is not as great. I don't have as many parks. The people are different. all these factors come into place, and then they think, oh, bugger this, I'll sell back in Melbourne or Brisbane, and I'll come back to Sydney. And I found a lot of people there. And I'll give you another thing. There's more millionaires and billionaires in Sydney than the rest of the country combined. And you've got to understand why, and that's because we live in one of the most beautiful cities in the world. Yeah. And that's why the prices I believe, will sustain here. Rural areas, on the other hand, look, I think that we will be putting a lot more pressure on rural areas, and you are seeing a lot of billionaires and millionaires buying out in, let's say, for example, like not towards Goulburn, but like that little region, up north towards Hunter Valley. I see a lot of people buying out there, and towards the Newcastle and maybe Port Stephens. So, and even like, if you look at the Hensworth, although they've sold recently, Byron Bay seems to be a bit of a trend at the moment. So
yes,
it seems like people do enjoy working remotely, and the tech sector is a lot is attributable to that, because we've had a big growth in tech sector.
Yes.
A huge growth in the tech sector, and brother-in-law being the case study there, and they don't necessarily need you to come to the office anymore. No. And but that's going to have another knock-on effect as well in the commercial markets with the office.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about that. What do you see there? Is I know some companies are asking their employees back only to justify that they have commercial leases.
Well, look, we're also getting rid, but we're starting to move away from offices at the moment, because a lot of our agents are working remotely from home, and look, they're on the street, and that's where they should be. But in the city, look, I have noticed a lot of that. A lot of companies enticing their workers to come back after this COVID lockdown ends. The reality is that I think a lot of people make that business decision and think, well, wait a minute, maybe we don't need to have as many offices here. Maybe we'll convert them back into residential. And I've heard a lot of refurbs happening in the city where they are thinking of going back into residential. So you may see that happening. Also, online sales have gone up in retail sector as well. So do you need to go to Pitt Street Mall?
No.
Another thing. No. So.
And so what about buying houses online without actually seeing them beforehand? Like, I just recently bought a car in the middle of lockdown, and I didn't even take it for a test drive. Like, I researched it, I took it for a test drive on YouTube basically, and bought it over email. So what about housing? Is this more of a trend happening there as well?
No. So you are seeing, online auctions are up. I think the auction clearance rate last week was like about 84%. But that doesn't have anything to do with the fact that it's online or offline. The reality is that every property in the world is unique. Not one or two properties are the same, no matter what. So so where cars, if you're buying a brand new car, or you're buying a car that is a certain type of car, and I will just go with a Jaguar hypothetically here. So Jaguar, you know the quality that the company produces. You know exactly what it is. So therefore there's a warranty involved in that, and the likelihood of you buying a lemon is very, very limited. Down to the single percentages. But in property, you have to. It's a tangible asset. You don't know what the ground is like. You don't know whether it's been eaten by, by pests or so on and so forth. And at the same time, it's, as you said in the beginning of our discussion, it's an emotional decision. You want to get there. You get to the street. You go, oh wow, it's completely different to what I saw on Google Street View.
Yeah.
It's actually quite nice. It's quite sunny. Oh, there's parks, there's cafes, there's so on and so forth. So look, it is something that people generally go out and have a look. But it's not to say that people don't see properties. They have buyers agents who kind of do their legwork for them, and sometimes they don't see it. They buy it, sight unseen. So there is that element, but it's not. I don't see that being. I don't see that being.
We talked offline the other day about people overextending themselves with mortgages. So, I think you said something like 9% stretched over the North Shore with people borrowing.
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to get a lot of house foreclosures once interest rate goes up? Do you foresee that, or?
Okay, so let's go on to interest rates. Okay, so interest rates first. Okay, so 3-year interest, you can get a 3-year fixed rate between 2 and 3%.
Yeah.
Okay. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
Neither have I. Not in my generation. I haven't heard two. So that means the banks have actuaries working for them. People are far smarter than I am.
Yeah.
And they sit there and they forecast these kind of because I'm on a variable rate myself, I'm not fixed.
Yeah.
So they're forecasting to see how they can make money, because that's what I guess any business would do. They want to make money. So the reality is they have all these kind of variables they stick into their like spreadsheets, and they can obviously foresee that the bank rate for the next 3 or 4 years won't go up past 3%.
Right.
So they believe that interest rates won't go up. So they're obviously saying, okay, fine, we'll fix rates at 3% or up to 3%, because we don't see the interest rates going up above 3%. So anyone who's got an approval right now, and I'll just give you another statistic, $32.2 billion, according to the ABS, of course, that I read earlier on, $32.2 billion have been mortgage approvals from July of 2020 to July of 2021. Now, to put that into perspective for you, that's 58.
That's nationally, right?
That's nationally, but that is 58% higher than last year. So between July of 2020 and July of 2021,
that $1 billion worth of housing approvals.
So 58% increase in housing approval from this time last year. So as of July of 2021, it's been 58% from July of 2020.
That's got to breed a lot of confidence economically in terms of a person's position in their job, because it'd be crazy to take $1 million mortgage with expectations that they're going to lose their job in the next 12 months, right? Well, I would.
That's right. No, and look, we're a credit hungry nation. I think we love living on credit. Where we're accustomed to it. One thing I love about Australia and our people is the fact that we when it comes to a crisis, unlike when I was in the UK and I was living there during the global financial crisis. See, in England they put their hands in their pockets. They save. So as soon as we heard of a global financial crisis, we put our hands in our pockets. We never spent.
Yeah.
Now that had a knock-on effect, and that's what made it actually even worse. And it became more of a depression. Where in Australia, if we're in a global financial crisis or people losing their jobs, they get credit cards out, they go out and spend.
Yes.
And then those restaurants will spend. So they're going to spend at restaurants. They're going to spend here. They're going to spend there. And then what happens is that has a ripple effect of the overall economy.
That's
and then
right.
they eventually get another job. Whether if they were in, let's say the health sector, they've moved on to the tech sector. So what I'm saying is that there are people losing jobs at the moment. I just spoke to a snake catcher, and I'll get to that a bit later. But I spoke to a snake catcher who said, look, I used to do an activity like this morning. And he said, look, my business is down a little bit. The reason why I'm a snake catcher now is because I used to do snake shows for kids, for parties, and unfortunately we're not getting bookings, and therefore I had to become a snake catcher. I never wanted to be a snake catcher. I wanted to do do these parties and events and so on and so forth and sign writing. Unfortunately, because of COVID, I can't. So that part of my business that I've invested hundreds of thousands of dollars into, the entertainment business being essentially what he's in, unfortunately is not doing well. So that's why I'm doing this job. So there you go. So people are kind of like going from one position to another position to another position to survive. Is that going to affect us as far as buying property? So bring it back to the topic. Yes, it will. There is mortgage stress out there. People are, for example, I think when I spoke to you last, it was in Gordon. An ABC report said that in Gordon it was I think it was about 8.9% or 8.5% mortgage stress in this area, which is quite a lot compared to, let's say, out west. They were saying like some of the suburbs out west towards Penrith and so on and so forth, Richmond, they're on 1 or 2% mortgage stress, so they're not stressed at all. So not stressed at all, but probably a lot less than us. But I looked at this other article actually on Sydney Morning Herald, and I'm sorry if I lost you at all.
No.
But it's actually showing that renters or mortgages in financial stress, and most of Sydney is between 30 and 40% financially stressed. And that's only come out when? There's a Sydney Morning Herald report about financially being stressed in September 20. So it was written by Shane Wright, and it was talking about mortgage stress scores as RBA says tax system pushes up house prices. So That's
So
the
we're still spending, really, which has come, I remember in early 2000s or late 90s, and we did a case study in Japan, same thing. And the government gave them money, like a government's giving us money right now if you own your own business. And what they found that the Japanese culture was that they would save it as well. So they actually had zero interest rates.
That's right.
Negative interest rates.
That's right. And look, this country is great as far as like supporting people, like I do find that a lot of countries probably wouldn't do what we did, but I think we did quite well as far as like the banks, they turned around and said, look, if you can't afford to make your repayments during these heavy periods, then we'll give you a like almost a delayed 6-month sabbatical, so you can and then just add that onto your the length of your mortgage. So they were good in that, and obviously that's backed by the government. But look, the government's lost a lot of money from this pandemic. The banks have probably lost a lot of money from this pandemic, and I'm sure in the future they will recover it. But will that affect the housing market? Not in the near future. I think maybe 2 or 3 years, maybe. But in Sydney, people have got loan approvals. The banks have got a criteria. They have to fill in that criteria, and if you don't get into that criteria where they stress test you. They do stress tests, right, through your disposition. And if you, like, for example, if you are seeing gambling or you've got some kind of thing on your credit history or your bank records, which they do get, then they may see you as a higher risk person. They may not give you the loan. So loan approvals are very big, and the people who are getting loan approvals right now are the ones who are pushing this market up. They're getting the loan approvals. They've got it in their hand. They've worked really hard to get the loan approval. They think, okay, I've got $2 million to spend. I'm going to go to Barara because it's a lovely suburb, and I'm going to go out there and utilize this before I lose it, because I don't want to lose the loan approval.
Exactly, because that process is a nightmare. Do you think it's something, because I know, like, working for myself and Tom working for himself, we had massive hoops to have to jump through.
That's right.
Because the banks were pretty much saying, look, we would have loaned it to you in a heartbeat if you're a full-time employee. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we could make 3 times what full-time you could as a full-time employee, and they were obviously seen as a safe option versus somebody who owned their own business. Mm-hmm. Do you think, or do you see banks starting to change that approval process in terms of? Yeah.
I think they're gonna get stricter on their lending criteria. I think there's a lot of pressure from I think the government to become stricter. I don't think they're going to do it now. They'll probably do it this time next year. Let everything settle, everyone comfortable, and then they'll start tightening it far further. So, for example, if you're looking to buy that second home or that investment property, they'll probably look at that and go, you know what, probably not. So the thing is, right now they've got to. I mean, they're very strict in their lending criteria. They're still very strict in their lending criteria, but it's just, as I said, it's going to get stricter probably. I think if they'll probably stress test the increase in interest rates, but it will only be by about 100 to 200 basis points, not much, right. But enough that, look, if you're sending your kid to a private school, you're doing this, you're doing that, you've got a lot of overheads in your life, including your personal life, then they may look at that and think, okay, well, you know what, if it goes up by, let's say, as I said, 100 or 200 basis points, you're probably not going to be able to afford that investment property, even though it pays off itself.
Yeah.
And that would hopefully open the avenue for first home buyers and buyers who are trying to get up onto that ladder to purchase that property without you being.
And what about restricting overseas buyers? Because I've heard, a lot of people think this is, people coming from China with a lot of money, they're investing in the property market, that's why the prices are going up. And then there's people have said that there's government regulations stopping that.
There are. I mean, look, we've got a very tight, what do you call it? There's double taxation on certain on overseas investors. Also, it's not like that. Our property, it used to be like that maybe about 10 years ago. A lot of Chinese investors would come out there and buy, but it's not just Chinese. Look, most of our people don't realize that the majority of our property is actually bought by Europeans. It's like that punch buggy theory, or that white car theory. Yeah. You don't notice how many white cars are on the road
until
until someone says to you, count how many white cars are on the road or how many punch buggies. So we used to play the game, and you notice, you go, oh my God, how many white cars on the road? I couldn't believe it. But the thing is that like you lose that. So then when you see the Chinese buyer, and it's funny, I think that 5-6 years ago I saw this like news report, and it was this Chinese buyer, blah blah, and I was like, wait a minute, that's the guy I went to school with.
Exactly.
You know,
He's
30, 40
Australian.
years ago. He is. His background is Chinese. Like my background is Middle Eastern or something to that effect. But the reality is that like we're Australian, and a lot of people who are buying here are Australian. And look, yes, we have had an influx of people wanting to live here from other countries, whether it is from China or whether it is from Europe, or from America or Canada or so on and so forth. But the thing is that like it's only because our country is desirable. Our city is desirable. Look at the way
everything that we offer.
So overseas investors will always want to, overseas buyers would always want to live here because it's such a desirable city to live in. And I'll give you another example. Is the fact that like if you look at our quality of life compared to in America, we would say that it's the one of the wealthiest countries, if not the wealthiest country on earth. But the reality is a lot of the wealthiest people want to live here. Yeah. They would give an arm and a leg to live here. And we get a lot of actors moving back here. A lot of and you see it all the time. So the reality is that's what's pushing prices up, and that's it's not really. I don't see it being like Chinese buyers, as they're saying. As a matter of fact, I think a lot of Chinese buyers. One of my buyers who was living in China and lived here for a while sold his house in North Taramara, and I said, "Well, where are you going?" He goes, "Why are you selling? Where are you going?" And he goes, "I'm going back to China. I find it better there than I do here. I love it there." So he's sold here and moving back there.
Back there, exactly. And the other thing I think that we've lost. We're losing a lot in. We've got the highest number of people per capita living by themselves, right? Mm-hmm. So that also is going to push up prices because people want to buy units by themselves rather than, in a lot of different cultures, they pool their money. They're smart with their money. They have grandparents. I know Tom's Czech. We went back to Prague and Czech Republic, and there was 4 generations living in one household, and you've got no childcare and you've got no aged care. So all of those expensive, you've got grandparents looking after grandchildren, you've got great-grandparents looking after it, and then you've got the parents who are the working entity, and they work as one. We seem to lose that and that community aspect of it, I find, here in Australia as well.
Yeah. So that's, I don't disagree with you on that. I fully agree. And I come from one of those families that we do pull because one day I may get sick or I may have, issues with the kids, and then my parents will jump in and help out here and there and so on and so forth. So and we've put our money together and we've ended up buying a few properties around Sydney and also regionally. And the reality is that if we didn't pull together, if I was just by myself, it'd be extremely hard. It would be extremely hard. So I think it's a smart option. I say to a lot of people who are in their 20s and even into their 30s and who are living at home, I say, look, you know what, it's not a bad thing.
Stay there. I tell them.
if you don't have, like, I mean, I lived a long time by myself. I went as soon as I had the time to move out of home, I just went out of home. I rented. I went to shared houses, so on and so forth. Lived in London, Ireland, so on and so forth by myself. Went to uni by myself. But the thing is that if I could take some of my time back again, I wish I'd done what some of my friends had did, who are a bit more responsible than I was. They may have not lived as much.
Yes.
But some of my friends, like one of my friends, he ended up buying a place on Murdervale Road in St Ives and lived there, and his house ended up turning into a got rezoned and ended up being a development site, and he made quite a considerable amount of money. And good on him, he did the things that probably I wasn't even interested. I was thinking, oh God, I don't want to live around St Ives. I've lived there all my childhood, But he was responsible, he was smart. He ended up putting all his money into there, working really hard, putting all his money into there and paying off a loan, which was, quite cheap. Maybe back there was like $500,000, even less, maybe $200,000-$300,000. And now he's, multimillionaire, and he travels first class around the world where, I'm looking at points on my everyday rewards card. I'm thinking, I may get an economy ticket to Cairns.
You can fly again. Okay, well, Ari, I'm going to leave you there. I thank you so much for your time. where can our listeners find if they are interested in getting into the property market, sale, buy? Because I know myself, you're a trusted, customer-centric, lovely real estate agent that I would go through. So where can our listeners find you?
Look, I've got a website. I've got assetrealty.com.au. But at the same time, we've got Facebook, so it's Asset Realty Gordon, and that's our Facebook page. And then we've got Twitter at Asset Realty, and then we've also got our Instagram. So we have Instagram and Pinterest as well. We do Pinterest to share ideas about properties and all that kind of stuff. So especially with our potential vendors. Pinterest, I don't know, do you know Pinterest at all?
Yeah, I don't use it for my business because
but you can like throw photos on a board of ideas of how to renovate your home, or throw ideas of what good homes are that are selling for good prices, what kind of designs they actually have inside. So it gives vendors an idea of how to renovate and create value from their property. So look, we have Asset Realty Gordon, that's our Pinterest page, and we also have the Instagram Asset Realty Gordon. So just search them up and you'll find us.
It's so innovative because I say, like with my media company, every company in 2020 has to be a media company. They have to have an online presence. They have to have a social presence. So the fact that you've hit all of those platforms already off and running, that's huge. So it does show you how innovative you are as an organisation. So.
Thank you.
Well, thank you again, Ari. I really appreciate your time.
No problem.
From one economist to another. I will speak to you soon.
Bye-bye.